It is now about a day and a half later after finishing The Hobbit, and I've just finished reading The Fellowship of the Ring, which is the first section of Lord of the Rings. A couple key points about just Lord of the Rings in general is that it is actually 6 books that are one long book, but are split up into basically 3 volumes, right? That is the lineage of Lord of the Rings. However, I believe this is also the way that they're published in, right? So it's a weird, kind of confusing, kind of J.R.R. Tolkien kind of thing. However, as we get further and further into this, I do think that this style is a barrier to entry for these stories, right? Which I think is another reason why I have not always positively looked at Lord of the Rings, because unless you have the time, like I do right now, it being my spring break, to basically sit down and read all of them, or read the majority of them, suddenly this becomes very, very hard to read, right? It's a hard thing to suddenly jump into the middle of the Lord of the Rings story because of how much lore and background there is, unless you're familiar with the lore and background already. So that's kind of my big thing about this book itself, Fellowship of the Ring. I think by far the most popular of the 3 sections of Lord of the Rings. This has really, I would say, the like the most memorable quotes out of all Lord of the Rings. The "you cannot pass" scene, the I will take the ring, or I will go to Mordor, though I do not know the way. All that wander are not lost. And then the "I'm going to Mordor." Well, of course you are, and I'm going with you. These all come from the Fellowship of the Ring, which really takes up, I think, the majority of kind of the popular culture references of Lord of the Rings. Well, I think we'll get to the "and you have my axe" and the "one does not simply walk into Mordor" later, but that's that. I still have the same problems with Lord of the Rings, or with Fellowship of the Ring, that I did with The Hobbit, of just the complete lack of women characters, but then also just the complete lack of, or this kind of based on what your race is, suddenly majority of things are known about you, except for the hobbits, which the hobbits are their own very separate thing. But yeah, right. Although in Fellowship of the Ring, I think the most powerful character that we see is Gondriel. Starts with a G. It's one of the high elves. She is one of the ones that wears one of the 3 elven rings, and she is really the most powerful out of pretty much everyone that they've met so far, besides Gandalf, and Balrog. But right, that's that one specific character who, even in their scenes of being shown that they're incredibly powerful, incredibly overwhelming, is so much of it is focused on her beauty, right? So that's still something that's still bothers me about Lord of the Rings. And then, just the whole idea of creed and race, and because you are a specific race, you are destined to do certain things, right? And even like when we talk about the hobbits, right? And this constant idea of both really Sam, Frodo, and Bilbo, all of them are pretty much being constantly told, while Gandalf is still alive, that there's much more about them than seems, right? Because they are just hobbits. But right, a lot of it's just about courage, which is really the big thing there. So that's that. Yeah. Other thoughts on the Fellowship? Certainly, it's interesting. It's certainly fun. The idea of going out beyond your homeland and exploring and being on a journey, even though it is treacherous, but being able to see new things. Obviously, something that's kind of like just a very, very important thing to many people. So that's that. Anything else to really say about the Fellowship of the Ring? It's coming to me. I know it is. I think another important thing to talk about with the Fellowship of the Ring is starting this idea of what is a speech act, right? And what is being sneaky versus being cruel. And this is just a question that I think has to get answered at some point, right? Of where you have this ring that is all powerful, but also turns the wearer invisible, and we have to go through this fight and battle between, well, what is a good use of the ring and what is a bad use of the ring? What is the line between being sneaky and being creative and being treacherous, right? And certainly we start kind of fighting this battle between the ring having power over people, right, and desire, and it's kind of clearly shown with, obviously, with Smeagol / Gollum. We see snippets of it with Frodo, with not wanting to take it out in front of people. We see it with Bilbo at the very beginning, and then we see it with Boromir, human, Boromir, that's his name, Boromir. We see it with Boromir, and just this idea of, and we even see it with Saruman the White, right? Where just the idea of even having the ring, and just the idea of possessing the ring, is enough to make them go mad. But really what I think that says is sometimes that there is a desire that is so great to humanity or to a person that just the concept of it is enough to make and destroy a company, right? And I think the easiest way to analogy to that is wealth and of greed and power, right? Mostly, like, I think in modern terms would be wealth, right? Of just this desire for wealth that is so overwhelming that eventually destroys a person, that eventually destroys company of travelers, right? Because we get so focused in on what it means to have wealth and what it means to have power that we forget the realities, and we forget the drawbacks to having that wealth and to having that power, right? Another thing that I think was actually a really, really important thing to discuss is the concept of what is fated and what is free choice or free will, right? And we kind of explored this concept with The Alchemist, right? But here we're getting a lot more lore into the ring, and that the ring decides, and the ring plays tricks effectively. This idea that the ring suddenly grows or shrinks depending on who's holding it, but then also that it seemingly grows incredibly heavy when it's drawn to something, right? But then also that the ring can just kind of slip on or slip off sometimes. We had it kind of explored in The Hobbit, right, with when Bilbo first puts on the ring by accident. But then I think in Fellowship of the Ring, it's most obvious with the tavern scene in which Frodo's doing kind of a song and dance, slips, falls, ring, his hand is in his pocket, the ring falls onto his finger somehow, some way. Right, but I think it calls in this further question of what is fated, what are they destined to do, and what is free will and free choice, right? At the end, is it free will and free choice that allows Frodo to go east to Mordor instead of where it would be safer for a little bit in the west, right? Is that free will? And even that, if that is free will, well, was it free will and free choice that allowed Boromir to go ring insane for a little bit in front of Frodo, right? Is that free will and free choice, or is that fated because it is forcing Frodo to go east and go to Mordor? Is it fated that Frodo must bear the entirety of the journey, even though at the very beginning there's discussion that, you know, maybe it is not his fate to do so, right? Maybe it is, he will begin the journey, but does not necessarily have to get it all the way there. Or is it fated that he has to do so, right? Even if no one else thinks so. So that's that. I think further questions of fate and free will, I think, come a little bit later. But that's that. That's the Fellowship of the Ring. That is, I think, the largest of the three. Maybe Return of the King is slightly larger, but about 400 pages. It took me about a day and a half of pretty much nonstop reading.